Hi, welcome to our channel, Learning the Law. Today, we'll be looking at sources of human rights law in Nigeria. If you remember, in our previous video, we were able to talk about terms used to refer to human rights, or in other words, types of human rights. Now, before we proceed, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing so that you won't miss our educative videos on different fields of law. Okay, let's proceed. Sources of human rights law. So what we mean by sources of human rights law is simple. Now, if you want to find human rights law, where do you go to? Which laws do you look into? Now, there are many of them in Nigeria and at international level. But for the purpose of this series, we are going to look at very few, which I believe they are the most fundamental. Anyway, let's see those that we are going to look at. We are going to look at the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Ratification and Enforcement Act, Fundamental Rights Enforcement Procedure Rules 2009, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now let's begin with the Constitution. If you remember, in our previous video, we said the Constitution contains fundamental rights in Chapter 4. We are referring to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. It contains fundamental rights in Chapter 4. So this is one of the sources of human rights law, because it contains human rights law in it. Now, the Constitution is beyond containing human rights law in it, because it is called the Grundnorm, because it is the origin of all powers, all laws, all authorities, as far as the Federal Republic of Nigeria is concerned. So any power, any law whatsoever that is not derived from the Constitution, then it is invalid. Why do I say so? Because the Constitution is the supreme, and all powers are derived from it. The executive, the legislative, and judicial powers are derived from the Constitution. So all other laws containing human rights derived their validity from the Constitution. And the Constitution itself contains human rights in Chapter 4. Now, the second is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Ratification and Enforcement Act. Now, if you remember, in our previous video, we said the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is an international law. It is at the same time a local law, because it is domesticated by an act of the National Assembly. What we mean by an act, any law made by the National Assembly is called an act. Any law made by State House of Assembly is called a law. And we also have subsidiary legislation. Now, when a particular act or a law empowered an authority or an officer whatsoever to make rules and regulations on a certain matter, then those rules and regulations made by an officer, not the legislature, but driving the powers from a particular law of the legislature, is called a subsidiary legislation. Now, African Charter on Human and People's Rights is also domesticated as our local law. It's one of the sources of human rights law. Then Fundamental Right Enforcement Procedure Rules. These are rules guiding enforcement of human rights in a court of law in Nigeria. Now, there are no rights in this law, but a procedure of enforcing the fundamental rights in Nigerian courts. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are mentioning the Universal Declaration of Human Rights because of its impact in the world. If you remember, after the Second World War, there was a kind of imbalance in the world. So there was need of creating the United Nations. And this Universal Declaration of Human Rights was made for the peace, unity, and well-being of all nations, all people all over the world. And one of the most important impact of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights is abolishing, slave trade in the world. Now, these are some of the basic sources of human rights law in Nigeria. As I said, there are other ones, but for the purpose of this video, these are the ones we consider. Now, if you have not subscribed, remember to subscribe to this channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it with family and friends. And remember to click the notification bell so that you won't miss our subsequent videos. Okay,